Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Terra Nova, watching through the main screen as the massive space station grew larger before them. Nexus Prime was unlike anything humans had ever built. The station stretched for miles in every direction, its surface covered in glowing towers and spinning rings. Ships from dozens of different worlds moved around it like busy insects. "First time seeing something like this, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her position at the weapons station. Her dark eyes reflected the lights from the alien station. "First time for all of us," Jake replied, adjusting his blue uniform. 3 months ago, we didn't even know aliens existed. Now we're about to meet 12 different species." The communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke in perfect English, though it sounded strange, like it came from underwater. "Human vessel Terra Nova. This is Nexus Prime Control. You are cleared for docking Bay 7. Please follow the guide lights." Jake nodded to his pilot. "Take us in, Rodriguez." As they moved closer to the station, Jake thought about how much had changed. The discovery of faster-than-light travel had been humanity's greatest achievement. It took them only 5 years to build their first ship capable of traveling between stars. When they picked up alien radio signals from the Kepler system, the whole world had held its breath. The docking process was smooth. As soon as the Terra Nova was secured, Jake could see alien figures waiting for them through the airlock windows. His heart beat faster. After all the radio conversations and video calls, he was finally going to meet them face to face. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Jake stepped through first, followed by Amy and his science officer, Dr. Lisa Park. The air smelled different here, cleaner somehow, with a faint metallic taste. 3 aliens waited for them. The first was tall and thin, almost like a walking tree, with silver bark-like skin and glowing blue eyes. The second looked like a large lizard that walked on 2 legs, covered in green scales and wearing what looked like a military uniform. The third was the strangest of all. It seemed to be made of pure light, shifting and changing shape as Jake watched. "Welcome to Nexus Prime," said the tree-like alien, its voice the same underwater sound they had heard on the radio. "I am Ambassador Feltar of the Nithrian people. This is Commander Zexthul of the Krillian military and General Morden of the Solari." Jake stepped forward and offered his hand. "Captain Jake Morrison representing Earth and humanity. This is Lieutenant Rodriguez and Dr. Park." Veltar looked at Jake's extended hand with curiosity, then carefully reached out with what might have been fingers. The touch was warm and sent a small electric shock up Jake's arm. "Fascinating," Veltar said. "Your species uses physical contact as greeting. Most civilized species abandoned such primitive customs long ago." Commander Zexthul, the lizard-like alien, made a sound that might have been laughter. "Primitive seems to be a theme with humans." "What do you mean?" Amy asked, her voice sharp. "Come," said Veltar quickly. "We have much to discuss. The Federation Council is eager to learn about your species." They walked through corridors that seemed to be made of living crystal. The walls pulsed with soft light, and Jake could hear a low humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Other aliens moved past them, some flying, others crawling on multiple legs, and a few that Jake couldn't even figure out how they moved. "Your faster-than-light technology is quite impressive," General Morden said, his voice coming from somewhere inside the shifting light that made up his body. "We detected your test flights from several systems away. Most species take centuries to develop such technology. Humans seem to have a talent for war machines," Zexthul added, his yellow eyes fixed on Jake. "Which brings us to an important matter." They entered a large room filled with screens and control panels. Several other aliens were already there, all wearing what looked like official uniforms. "Before any species can join the Federation," Veltar explained, "we must conduct a full security review. This includes inspection of your military capabilities." "We understand," Jake said. "We're happy to cooperate." "Excellent. Please provide complete technical specifications for all your weapon systems." Dr. Park stepped forward with a data tablet. "We've prepared everything you requested. Ship-mounted railguns, missile systems, projectile weapons, and defensive systems. One of the aliens at the control panels, who looked like a giant insect, began reading the data. After a few minutes, it started making clicking sounds that Jake realized was laughter. "Are you certain this data is correct?" the insect alien asked. "Of course," Amy said. "Why?" Zexthul moved closer, his large head tilting as he studied the humans. "You still use kinetic weapons, projectiles, bullets." "Yes," Jake said slowly. "Is that a problem?" The room fell silent. Then, one by one, the aliens began making sounds that Jake realized was laughter. Even the dignified Ambassador Veltar seemed amused. "Kinetic weapons," Zexthul repeated. "Physical projectiles. You might as well be throwing rocks." "I don't understand," Jake said, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. General Mordun's light form flickered brighter. "Captain Morrison, most species abandon kinetic weapons within 50 years of developing spaceflight. They are crude, inefficient, and completely obsolete." "What do you use instead?" Dr. Park asked. "Energy weapons," the insect alien replied. "Plasma cannons, matter disruptors, quantum field generators, weapons that can tear apart atoms or bend space itself." "And you still use metal bullets?" Zexthul asked, his voice full of disbelief. "They work," Amy said defensively. "So does rubbing sticks together to make fire," Zexthul replied. "But civilized species use fusion reactors." Veltar raised what might have been a hand for silence. "Please understand, we mean no offense. It is simply surprising. Your faster-than-light technology is quite advanced, yet your weapons are more primitive than what some species used in their Stone Age." Jake felt his jaw tighten. "Our weapons may be simple, but they're effective." "Against what?" Zexthul asked. "Other humans using similar primitive technology?" "Captain, you are about to enter a galaxy where civilizations can destroy entire planets. With a single shot, your bullets would bounce off the shields of a child's toy ship." "Perhaps," suggested another alien that looked like a walking jellyfish, "humans could be placed in the non-combat species category. Many successful civilizations focus on trade and science rather than military might." "We're not helpless," Jake said, his voice harder now. "Of course not," Veltar said in a soothing tone. "Every species has its strengths. Humans clearly excel at rapid technological development. Perhaps in time you will develop proper weapon systems. With Federation help, naturally," added Zexthul. "We could have you equipped with modern weapons within a decade." Jake looked around the room at the assembled aliens, all of them watching, the humans with expressions that seemed to mix pity with amusement. He thought about the weapons aboard the Terra Nova, the railguns that could punch through asteroid hulls, the missiles that could level city blocks, the small arms that his Marines trained with every day. "Thank you for the offer," Jake said, finally. "We'll consider it." "Excellent," Veltar said. "Now, shall we discuss the other requirements for Federation membership?" As the meeting continued, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The aliens spoke about humans, like they were children who had just learned to walk. Their weapons were primitive, their customs were crude, and their technology was barely adequate. But Jake remembered something his old military instructor had told him years ago. The best weapon isn't always the newest one. Sometimes it's the one nobody expects. Looking around the room full of advanced aliens with their energy weapons and matter disruptors, Jake wondered if there might be a reason humans had kept their primitive weapons after all. 3 weeks had passed since the embarrassing meeting with the Federation Council. Jake Morrison sat in his quarters aboard the Terra Nova, reading reports about Federation technology. The ship was still docked at Nexus Prime while the aliens decided if humans were advanced enough to join their civilization. Dr. Lisa Park had spent every day in the Federation libraries, studying their science and history. She knocked on Jake's door and entered when he called out. "Captain, you need to see this," she said, holding a datapad. Her face was pale and worried. "What is it?" Jake asked, setting down his own reports. "I've been reading about something called the Devourers. They're mentioned in the oldest Federation records, but most of the files are restricted." Before Jake could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the station. The lights changed from their normal blue to a harsh red, and an Announcement echoed through the corridors in multiple alien languages. Jake's communication device crackled to life. It was Ambassador Veltar, and for the first time the alien sounded frightened. "Captain Morrison, please report to the command center immediately. We have an emergency situation." Jake and Lisa ran through the corridors of Nexus Prime. Aliens were moving everywhere, some flying, others running on legs or tentacles. The calm, peaceful atmosphere of the station had been replaced by panic. The command center was chaos. Dozens of aliens worked at control stations while huge screens showed star maps and scanner readings. Admiral Kethmore, a blue-skinned alien who looked like he lived underwater, was giving orders to multiple ships at once. "Captain Morrison," Veltar said as Jake approached. "Thank you for coming quickly." "What's happening?" Jake asked. "Commander." Zexthul, the lizard alien who had mocked human weapons, turned from a scanner station. His usual confident attitude was gone, replaced by something that looked like terror. "They're back," he said in a whisper. "Who's back?" Lisa asked. Admiral Kethmore's large black eyes focused on the humans. "The Devourers. Our long-range sensors picked them up 2 hours ago. They're heading straight for the Kepler system." "I don't understand," Jake said. "Who are the Devourers?" Veltar's glowing form dimmed. "An ancient enemy. They appeared over 800 years ago and destroyed entire civilizations. Billions died before they suddenly vanished into deep space. They consume everything," Zexthul added. "Planets, ships, people. They eat entire star systems and leave nothing behind." Lisa stepped forward. "I've been reading about them. The records say they can adapt to any weapon used against them." "That's impossible," Jake said. "Not impossible," Admiral Kethmore said grimly. "They are a biological species, but they evolve in real time. Their bodies change to resist whatever attacks them." On the main screen, Jake could see dots of light moving through space. Each dot represented a ship, but these ships looked wrong somehow. They were organic, like massive insects or sea creatures floating through the void. "How many ships?" Jake asked. "Over 3,000, Admiral Kethmore replied. "And they're heading for Kepler 442b. "That's a Federation colony world," Veltar explained. 50 million people live there." Jake watched the screen as more information appeared. The Devourer ships were massive, some of them larger than entire space stations. They moved in perfect formation like a swarm of predators hunting prey. "What's the plan?" Jake asked. Admiral Kethmore turned to face him. "Captain Morrison, with respect, this is not a human concern. These creatures are beyond anything your species has ever faced." "But you'll evacuate the colony, right?" Lisa asked. "There isn't time," Zexthul said. "The Devourers will reach Kepler 442b in 18 hours. It would take 3 days to evacuate 50 million people." "So you're going to fight them," Jake said. "Tonigo. Entire Federation fleet is mobilizing," Admiral Kethmore confirmed. "Every ship, every weapon we have." Jake looked around the command center. Despite their fear, the aliens seemed confident in their abilities. Their screen showed dozens of Federation warships moving into position. Each ship was armed with the advanced energy weapons they had bragged about: plasma cannons, quantum, disruptors, matter destroyers. "Captain Morrison," Veltar said, "we appreciate your offer to help, but your ship should evacuate to a safe distance." "Our weapons won't be effective?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. "Your kinetic weapons are designed for fighting other humans," Zexthul explained. "The Devourers have biological armor that has evolved over millions of years. Your bullets would be like throwing pebbles at a mountain." Jake felt the same frustration he had experienced 3 weeks ago. Once again, the aliens were treating humans like children who couldn't help with adult problems. "We could provide support," he suggested. "Medical aid, supplies, communications." "That would be helpful," Admiral Kethmore said in a tone that suggested it wouldn't be helpful at all. "Please move your ship to the evacuation zone with the other non-combat vessels." As Jake and Lisa walked back to the Terra Nova, they passed groups of aliens preparing for battle. Some were loading ammunition for energy weapons, others were checking shield generators and plasma conduits. Everyone seemed to know exactly what they were doing. They've been fighting wars for thousands of years. Lisa said quietly. They must know what they're doing. Maybe, Jake replied, but something bothered him. Back on the Terra Nova, Jake called his senior officers to the bridge. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez looked eager for action, while Captain Ben Carter, their Marine commander, seemed frustrated at being left out of the fight. So we're supposed to sit this one out? Amy asked. Those are our orders, Jake said. The Federation considers this beyond our capabilities. What do we know about these Devourers? Ben asked. Lisa activated the main screen and showed them the data she had gathered. They're a hive mind species. Individual creatures aren't very intelligent, but together they act like a single massive brain. They reproduce by consuming other life forms. And they adapt to weapons, Amy added. According to the records, they can change their biology to resist whatever attacks them. How is that possible? Ben asked. Evolution that happens in minutes instead of millions of years, Lisa explained. Their cells can reorganize themselves based on external threats. Jake studied the information on the screen. Something about it reminded him of a lecture he had attended at the military academy years ago. Lisa, show me the historical records of species that fought the Devourers. Lisa worked at her console, bringing up ancient Federation files. Here's what I could find. The Zephyrians fought them with energy weapons and were completely destroyed. The Calthians used plasma cannons and lasted 3 days. The Mortex civilization had the most advanced matter disruptors in the galaxy, and they were wiped out in 6 hours. What about species that survived? Jake asked. Lisa frowned. That's odd. According to these records, only 3 species successfully fought off the Devourers 800 years ago, but there's no information about what weapons they used. Why not? The files are corrupted or classified at the highest levels, but there are references to something called primitive countermeasures that were effective. Amy leaned forward. Primitive countermeasures? What does that mean? Before anyone could answer, the ship's communication system activated. It was Admiral Keth Moore. All vessels, this is Fleet Command. The Devourer swarm has been engaged by our advanced scouts. Initial reports are concerning. The enemy appears to be adapting faster than our models predicted. Jake felt a cold chill run down his spine. On the screen, he could see the Federation fleet moving into position around Kepler 442b. Hundreds of ships with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, all preparing to face an enemy that could evolve to resist anything they threw at it. Captain, Amy said quietly, I have a bad feeling about this. Jake nodded, watching the Federation ships disappear into the distance. For the first time since meeting the aliens, he wondered if their advanced technology might not be enough. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he began to think about those primitive countermeasures that had worked 800 years ago. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Terra Nova, watching the battle unfold on the main screen. The Federation fleet had taken position around Kepler 442b, their ships spread out in a defensive formation. Each vessel gleamed with the power of advanced technology. Plasma cannons, quantum disruptors, and matter destroyers all charged and ready. First contact in 30 seconds, reported the communication officer, relaying messages from the Federation command ship. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at her weapon station, her hands moving over controls that would remain unused. I hate sitting here doing nothing, she muttered. Orders are orders, Jake replied, though he felt the same frustration. The first wave of Devourer ships came into view on the long-range scanners. They looked like massive insects made of living metal, their surfaces rippling and changing as they moved through space. Each one was the size of a small moon. Federation ships are opening fire, Dr. Lisa Park reported from her science station. The battle began with a spectacular display of light and energy. Plasma beams cut through space like burning swords, while quantum disruptors created holes in reality itself. The matter destroyers fired invisible beams that simply made parts of Devourer ships disappear. For the first few minutes, it looked like the Federation would win easily. Several Devourer ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Others had huge chunks torn from their hulls by the energy weapons. They're doing it, Amy said with excitement. Look at those hits. But Jake noticed something troubling. The Devourer ships that had been damaged were not retreating. Instead, they seemed to be studying the attacks, their surfaces changing color and texture. "Lisa, are you monitoring the Devourer biosignatures?" Jake asked. Lisa worked at her console, her face growing pale. "Captain, something strange is happening. The cellular structure of their hulls is changing." On the screen, they could see more Federation ships firing their weapons. Plasma cannons that had destroyed Devourer vessels minutes before now seemed to have less effect. The beams hit the alien ships, but did far less damage. "Federation command. To all ships," came Admiral Kethmore's voice over the radio. "Increase power to maximum. The enemy appears to be developing resistance." Jake watched as the Federation ships pushed their weapons to full power. The energy beams became brighter and more intense. For a moment, they began destroying Devourer ships again, but then the adaptation continued. "Captain," Lisa said, her voice shaking, "the Devourers are evolving in real time. Their hull composition is changing to absorb plasma energy." Within an hour, the plasma cannons had become almost useless. The beams struck the Devourer ships and simply disappeared, absorbed by hull plating that had learned to convert energy into harmless heat. "Switch to quantum disruptors," Admiral Kethmore ordered. The Federation ships changed tactics. Quantum weapons created tears in space-time itself, wounds in reality that should have destroyed anything they touched. At first they worked perfectly, cutting Devourer ships in half. But after 30 minutes, even the quantum disruptors began to fail. The Devourer hulls developed something that Lisa could only describe as quantum padding, a biological material that somehow cushioned the effects of space-time distortion. "This is impossible," Amy said, staring at the screen. "How can they adapt to weapons that tear apart reality?" "Evolution on a scale we've never seen," Lisa replied. "Their entire species is like one giant learning machine. The matter destroyers were the Federation's last hope. These weapons didn't fire energy or create explosions. They simply removed matter from existence. There was no defense against having parts of your ship cease to exist. For 20 minutes, the matter destroyers cut through Devourer ships like invisible swords. Huge sections of the alien vessels simply vanished, leaving clean cuts that should have been impossible to survive. But the Devourers learned from this attack too. Their ships began to develop what looked like biological airlocks around vital areas. When matter was destroyed, the ships could seal off the damage and continue fighting. "They're adapting to every weapon we have," Jake said in amazement and horror. "Federation casualties are mounting," Lisa reported, monitoring the battle. "Communications. They've lost 18 ships and the Devourers are still advancing." On the screen, Jake could see Devourer ships landing on the surface of Kepler 442b. The planet's defensive systems, massive energy cannons built into the ground, fired upward at the invading ships. Like all Federation weapons, they worked at first but quickly became useless as the Devourers adapted. "Ground forces are requesting immediate support," the communication officer reported. "The planetary defense grid has failed." Captain Ben Carter, the Marine commander, stood near the back of the bridge watching the battle. His face was grim as he saw Federation soldiers being overwhelmed by Devourer ground troops. "Captain, we have to do something," he said. "With what?" Jake asked. "Our weapons are even more primitive than theirs." "Maybe that's not a bad thing," Ben replied quietly. Jake turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" "The Devourers are adapting to energy weapons," Ben explained. "Plasma, quantum fields, matter destruction, all forms of energy. But what if we used something they haven't seen before?" Amy understood first. "Kinetic weapons. Bullets and missiles. That's crazy," Lisa said. "If energy weapons can't hurt them, how could bullets work?" But Jake was thinking about something his military academy instructor had taught him long ago. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. On the screen, the Federation fleet was in full retreat. More than half their ships had been destroyed or disabled. The Devourers had adapted to every weapon in their arsenal. Admiral Kethmore's voice came over the radio, filled with desperation. "All remaining ships fall back to secondary positions. We need time to develop new tactics." "Admiral," Jake said, opening a communication channel. "This is Captain Morrison. Request permission to assist in the ground battle." There was a long, Pause. When Kethmore replied, his voice was bitter. Captain Morrison, we appreciate the offer, but I don't see how your primitive weapons could succeed where our advanced technology has failed. Maybe that's exactly why they might work, Jake said. Another pause. In the background, Jake could hear reports of Federation ground forces being overwhelmed. 50 million civilians were trapped on the planet below, and the Devourers were consuming everything in their path. Captain, Kethmore said finally, at this point we're willing to try anything. You have permission to land on Kepler 442b. Jake turned to his crew. Amy was checking her weapons systems. Ben was already heading for the armory to prepare his Marines. Lisa was studying Devourer biology, looking for weaknesses. Amy, take us down to the planet, Jake ordered. Ben, get your people ready. We're going to find out if sometimes the old ways are the best ways. As the Terra Nova descended toward the battle-torn planet, Jake thought about the mocking laughter of the aliens when they had seen human weapons. Bullets and missiles had seemed so primitive compared to plasma cannons and quantum disruptors. But the Devourers had never faced bullets before. They had spent millions of years learning to adapt to energy weapons. Jake wondered what would happen when they met something as simple and ancient as a chunk of metal moving very fast. Entering atmosphere, Amy reported. I can see Devourer, ground forces spreading across the northern continent. Jake looked at the screen showing the alien creatures swarming over the planet's surface. They looked like giant insects crossed with military vehicles, their bodies constantly shifting and changing as they learned from each Federation attack. Let's see how they handle something they've never seen before, Jake said, as the Terra Nova dropped toward the surface of a world at war. The Terra Nova touched down on the surface of Kepler 442b with a soft thud. Through the main screen, Jake Morrison could see the devastation around them. Buildings lay in ruins, their walls melted by Devourer weapons. Strange organic growths covered the ground where the aliens had been feeding. Captain Ben Carter stood ready at the airlock with 200 human Marines. Each soldier carried the same weapons that had made the Federation aliens laugh: rifles that fired metal bullets, grenade launchers, and rocket-propelled explosives. Remember, Ben told his troops over the radio, we don't know if our weapons will work, but we're going to find out. Dr. Lisa Park sat at her science station, monitoring Devourer movements. Captain, I'm reading a large group of them about 2 miles north. They're attacking a Federation outpost. How many? Jake asked. At least 500 Devourer ground troops plus several of their bioships providing support. Jake opened a channel to the Federation forces. This is Captain Morrison to Federation Outpost Gamma 7. We're moving to assist you. A desperate voice replied. Captain Morrison, this is Sub-Admiral Rixwin. We appreciate any help, but you should know our situation is hopeless. Our energy weapons stopped working an hour ago. The Devourers have adapted to everything we have. Copy that, Admiral. We're on our way. Ben Carter's Marines left the ship in full combat gear. They spread out in standard military formation, moving carefully through the ruined landscape. Jake, followed with Amy Rodriguez and Dr. Marcus Kim, a human military historian who had studied alien warfare. Dr. Kim, Jake said as they walked, what do you think our chances are? Marcus Kim was an older man with gray hair and sharp eyes. He had spent years studying how different species fought wars. Captain, the Federation has forgotten something important about warfare. What's that? The most advanced weapon isn't always the best weapon. Sometimes simple solutions work better than complex ones. They reached a hill overlooking the Federation outpost. Below them, Jake could see the battle raging. Devourer creatures that looked like giant spiders made of living metal were attacking Federation soldiers. The aliens fired their energy weapons, but the beams simply bounced off or were absorbed by the Devourer armor. Those things are huge, Amy whispered. Each Devourer was the size of a small building, with multiple legs and what looked like biological cannons growing from their backs. Ben Carter spoke into his radio. All units, targets in sight. Remember, aim for center mass and keep firing until... They stopped moving. Staff Sergeant Tony Brooks led the first squad down the hill. He was a veteran soldier who had fought in conflicts across human space. His squad carried standard assault rifles loaded with armor-piercing bullets. Open fire, Tony shouted. The human weapons made a sound the battlefield had never heard before, the sharp crack of gunpowder explosions and the whistle of metal bullets cutting through air. It was a primitive sound compared to the humming and buzzing of energy weapons. The bullet struck the nearest devourer creature. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, to everyone's amazement, the creature stumbled and fell. Green fluid poured from holes in its armor where the bullets had punched through. "It's working!" Ben Carter shouted over the radio. "The bullets are going through their armor." More human soldiers opened fire. Their rifles chattered as they poured bullets into the devourer forces. Creatures that had shrugged off plasma cannons and quantum disruptors were falling to simple metal projectiles. Private Kelly White, a combat engineer, fired her grenade launcher at a group of devourers. The explosive shell detonated among them, sending metal fragments in all directions. The creatures were torn apart by the blast. "How is this possible?" Sub-Admiral Rixwin asked over the radio. The Federation officer sounded shocked. Dr. Kim smiled as he watched the battle. "Admiral, your people have forgotten the most basic principle of warfare. The Devourers can adapt to energy, but they can't adapt to physics." "I don't understand," Rixwin replied. "Evolution can change how their bodies handle energy," Dr. Kim explained. "They can learn to absorb plasma or deflect quantum fields. But evolution can't change the laws of physics. When a piece of metal hits them at high speed, the laws of momentum and energy transfer still apply." Sergeant Maya Johnson, a sniper positioned on a nearby roof, fired her rifle at a devourer that was trying to escape. The bullet traveled over half a mile and struck the creature in what might have been its head. The alien collapsed immediately. "Confirmed. Kill at 800 meters, Maya reported. These things have no defense against kinetic impact." The tide of battle was turning. Human Marines advanced through the battlefield, their simple weapons cutting through devourer forces that had seemed unstoppable minutes before. The Federation soldiers watched in amazement as 200 humans accomplished what thousands of their people had failed to do. But the Devourers were learning. Jake could see the creatures beginning to change, their armor becoming thicker and harder. "Dr. Kim," Jake said, "they're adapting to our weapons too." "Not as fast as they adapted to energy weapons," Kim replied. "Physical adaptation takes longer than energy adaptation. And there are limits to how much they can change." Tony Brooks fired a rocket-propelled grenade at a devourer that had grown extra armor plating. The explosion sent the creature flying backward, its thick armor cracked and broken. "Armor doesn't help much against high explosives," Tony said with satisfaction. Kelly White set up demolition charges around a group of devourers that were trying to form a defensive position. The explosives detonated in a series of thunderous blasts, sending fragments of metal and alien flesh in all directions. "The beauty of explosives," she explained to a watching Federation soldier, "is that they don't care how tough you are. Physics always wins." The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, the Devourers were in full retreat. Their bioships lifted off from the planet's surface, carrying the survivors back to space. For the first time since the invasion began, the aliens had been defeated. Sub-Admiral Rixwin approached Jake and his officers. The insectoid alien's large eyes stared at the human weapons with new respect. "Captain Morrison," Rixwin said, "I owe you an apology. We dismissed your weapons as primitive, but they've saved our lives." "Sometimes old solutions work better than new ones," Jake replied. Amy Rodriguez was checking the battlefield with her sensors. "Captain, I'm picking up transmissions from the Devourer ships. They're reporting to their main fleet." Dr. Kim listened to the alien communications through his translation device. "They're confused," he said. "They don't understand how their adaptation failed. They're calling human weapons impossible technology." Jake laughed. "Impossible technology? They think bullets are more advanced than plasma cannons." "In a way they are," Dr. Kim said seriously. "Energy weapons are complex solutions to the problem of warfare, but sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective one." As the human Marines gathered their equipment, Jake looked up at the sky where Devourer ships were retreating into space. The Federation fleet was regrouping, and he could see Admiral Kethmore's command ship approaching the planet. "Captain," Amy said, "we're receiving a message from Admiral Kethmore. He wants to speak with you immediately." Jake nodded. "Put him through." The Admiral's voice came over the radio, filled with amazement and hope. "Captain Morrison, what you've accomplished here today changes everything. Can your weapons work in space combat as well?" Jake looked at his officers. Amy was already calculating firing solutions for their ship's railguns. Ben Carter was thinking about boarding actions with human marines. Dr. Kim was studying data about Devourer ship construction. "Admiral," Jake said, "I think it's time the galaxy learned why humans never gave up their primitive weapons." Admiral Ruth Hayes arrived at Kepler 442b 12 hours after the ground battle ended. Her fleet of 30 human ships moved into orbit around the planet, their hulls bristling with railguns, missile launchers, and kinetic bombardment systems. Every weapon was designed around the same principle that had saved the Federation outpost, throwing metal at very high speeds. Jake Morrison stood in the Federation High Council chambers aboard Nexus Prime, facing the most powerful aliens in the galaxy. Chancellor Quoven, an ancient being made of living crystal, sat at the center of the council table. Around him were representatives from all 12 Federation species, their faces showing mixtures of confusion, amazement, and embarrassment. "Captain Morrison," Chancellor Quoven said, his voice like grinding stone, "we have called this emergency session to understand what happened at Kepler 442b. Your species accomplished something we thought impossible." Dr. Marcus Kim stood beside Jake, carrying a datapad filled with historical research. "Honorable Chancellor, what happened wasn't impossible. It was inevitable." Commander Zex Thul, the lizard alien who had mocked human weapons, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "How can primitive bullets defeat an enemy that adapted to our most advanced weapons?" "Because you forgot your own history," Dr. Kim replied calmly. The council chamber fell silent. Dr. Kim activated a holographic display showing ancient Federation records. 800 years ago, when the Devourers first appeared, they destroyed dozens of civilizations. But 3 species successfully fought them off. Do you know what those species used? Ambassador Veltar's glowing form flickered. "The records from that time are incomplete." "No," Dr. Kim said. "They're classified, but humans have a talent for finding information that others want hidden." Jake watched as Dr. Kim displayed images from the ancient war. The Corvani used crossbows and ballistas. The Threx fought with chemically propelled projectiles. The Valdari used mass drivers that threw chunks of metal. "Impossible," Sub-Admiral Rixwin said. "Those are all primitive kinetic weapons." "Exactly," Dr. Kim said. "Every species that survived the first Devourer invasion did so using kinetic weapons. Every species that relied only on energy weapons was completely destroyed." Chancellor Quoven leaned forward. "Are you saying we knew this and forgot?" "You didn't forget," Jake said. "You deliberately hid it. The Federation wanted to believe that advancement meant abandoning old technology. Kinetic weapons reminded you of your primitive past." Chief Engineer Sam Davis, who had arrived with Admiral Hayes, stepped forward. "We studied your archives. After the Devourers disappeared, the Federation made a decision. They classified all records about kinetic weapons being effective and promoted energy weapons as the only civilized form of warfare." "Why would we do that?" Veltar asked. "Because admitting that primitive weapons worked better than advanced ones would have undermined your entire philosophy," Dr. Kim explained. "The Federation built its identity around technological superiority. Kinetic weapons represented everything you wanted to leave behind." Sam Davis activated another display showing human weapon designs. "What you call primitive, we call practical. Our railguns use electromagnetic fields to accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds. Our missiles carry multiple warheads that separate during flight. Our bullets are made from advanced alloys and can penetrate almost anything. But they're still just pieces of metal being thrown," Zex Thul protested. "Yes," Sam said with a smile, "and that's why they work." On the main screen they could see the space battle unfolding around Kepler 442b. Admiral Hayes's human fleet was engaging the remaining Devourer bioships with devastating effectiveness. The human ships moved in formation, their railguns firing streams of metal projectiles. Each shot was simple, just a piece of tungsten or steel accelerated to enormous speed, but the Devourers had no defense against them. The Devourer ships are trying to adapt, reported a Federation officer monitoring the battle. Their hulls are changing composition, but the human projectiles are still penetrating. That's because you can't evolve around physics, Sam explained. They can change their hull material, but they can't change the laws of momentum and energy. When something heavy hits something else at high speed, damage happens. Jake watched as human missiles struck Devourer ships. Unlike energy weapons that could be absorbed or deflected, the missiles simply punched through the alien hulls and exploded inside. The beauty of kinetic weapons, Jake said, is their simplicity. No exotic particles, no quantum fields, no plasma containment, just basic physics that works the same way everywhere in the universe. Admiral Hayes's voice came through the communication system. Federation Command, this is Admiral Hayes. The Devourer fleet is breaking off. They're retreating to deep space. A cheer went up from the Federation officers in the command center. For the first time in days, they had hope. Chancellor, Quoven stood up slowly, his crystal body reflecting the lights in the chamber. Captain Morrison, Dr. Kim, I believe we owe your species an apology. You don't owe us anything, Jake said, but you might want to learn from this. What do you mean? Veltar asked. Dr. Kim brought up a final display showing weapon development across different species. Every civilization goes through the same pattern. They start with simple weapons, develop energy weapons, then abandon kinetic weapons as primitive. But the smartest species keep both. Humans maintained kinetic weapons not because we were too primitive to develop better ones, Jake explained. We kept them because we studied your history. We learned from the mistakes of civilizations that put all their faith in advanced technology. Sam Davis nodded. We knew that someday we might face an enemy that could adapt to energy weapons, so we made sure we always had an alternative. Our hybrid approach, Jake continued, combines the best of both worlds, advanced targeting systems and propulsion technology, but with simple kinetic payloads that work regardless of enemy adaptation. Chancellor Quoven looked around the council chamber at the other species representatives. It seems we have much to learn from humanity. The first lesson, Dr. Kim said, is that progress doesn't always mean abandoning old solutions. Sometimes the newest technology isn't the best technology. And sometimes, Jake added, being underestimated is an advantage. 3 months later, Federation shipyards were busy retrofitting their fleets with kinetic weapons. Human engineers worked alongside alien scientists, combining advanced alien technology with proven human weapon designs. Jake stood on the bridge of the Terra Nova, now designated as the flagship of the new Federation kinetic fleet. Outside, he could see ships from 12 different species, all armed with railguns, missile launchers, and mass drivers. It's funny, Amy Rodriguez said from her weapon station. 3 months ago they were laughing at our bullets. Now they're copying our designs. That's how progress really works, Jake replied. Not by abandoning everything old, but by keeping what works and improving what doesn't. Dr. Kim approached with a datapad. Captain, I've been going through more Federation archives. It turns out this isn't the first time they've forgotten important lessons. What do you mean? Pattern recognition, redundant systems, physical backup controls. There are dozens of primitive concepts that successful civilizations used, but the Federation abandoned for more elegant solutions. Jake smiled. Sounds like we have more teaching to do. Outside, the stars looked the same as they always had, but Jake knew that everything had changed. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the old ways were preserved for very good reasons, and humanity, the species that everyone thought was too primitive to matter, had reminded them that the most advanced solution wasn't always the best one. In the distance, long-range sensors showed no sign of the Devourers. They had retreated to wherever they had hidden for 800 years, probably adapting and preparing for their next attack. But when they returned, They would find a galaxy that remembered how to fight them, and leading that defense would be the species that never forgot that sometimes the best weapon was just a piece of metal moving very, very fast.